Welcome, Russell Rainey.
Good morning, men. Good morning and welcome to session 3 of the Great Adventure. Over the last couple weeks, as Scott was talking about, we've been talking about some deep things. And kind of if you put them in 2 categories, we've been talking about some deep thoughts and we've been talking about some deep actions. You know, deep thoughts like unique design and half-life manhood and created by God. And deep thoughts like the full-on poster child for stupid. Deep actions like making a life, getting in the arena, living differently, and pull the trigger and ride the bullet. Now, I know some of us are just naturally more comfortable with deep thoughts than we are with deep actions, and there's others of us that are more comfortable with deep actions. But the trick is, for a real man, the trick is to learn to be good at both, deep thoughts and deep actions. You know, last week I read that great quote to you from Theodore Roosevelt about the importance of getting in the arena. Here's another TR quote that I think you'll like. It's about the importance of both thoughts and actions. In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The worst thing you can do is nothing. Deep thoughts combined with deep actions, that's what's going to get it done. And just to make sure we're really clear on kind of what that looks like, I want to give you a couple of examples like this one. I can picture in my mind a world without war and a world without hate. And I can picture us attacking that world because they'd never expect it. Really? I have 6 locks. Here's another one. I have 6 locks all in a row on my door. And when I go out, I lock every other one. I figure no matter how long somebody stands there picking the locks, they're always locking 3. We got to get some caffeine in the coffee for you guys. All right, I'm going to try one more for you inventive thinkers. Okay, instead of a trap door, how about a trap window? You know, the guy looks out. If he leans too far, he falls out. Wait, I guess that's like a regular window. Deep thoughts combined with deep actions, they really are the key to the great adventure. Now, over the last 2 weeks, I've suggested that many men are missing the bigger picture of life. And in missing the bigger picture of life, they're missing the adventure that goes with it. And the big picture is simply this: any man can make a living. It takes an adventure to make a life. Today, we're going to pause and process that a bit so it's not just a concept. It doesn't do us any good if it's just a concept. We need to process it so it becomes a reality in our life. So let's dig in and process a little bit. Our focus last week was on the 3 big, hairy questions of life. Those great questions that most men choose to ignore, but adventurers choose to face. Who am I? Why am I here? And where am I going? We are literally betting our lives on our answers to those questions. And because we're betting our lives on those answers, guesswork and cultural conformity just won't do. We just know those answers aren't going to be good enough. So what we've been doing is looking at the age-old wisdom of the Bible to see how it answers those 3 big, hairy questions of life. And what we saw was that the Bible answers the who am I question with, I am a man created by God. Answering, I am a man, is just not enough. That answer will never work because life will never be bigger than you with that answer. I am a man created by God is when the adventure begins, because that's when life finally gets bigger than you. And that can't be a token acknowledgement. That in some way, at some time, that's got to become personal and real. I know it takes faith to believe that. I know that. It takes faith not to believe that. To believe that we're some cosmic accident of random chance takes just as much faith as believing that I am a man created by God. Either way, we're living a life of faith. Now, the Bible answers the why am I here question with, I am a man commissioned by God. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. The Bible answers the where am I going question with, I am a man who will ultimately face God. That brings us full circle. I'm created by God, I'm commissioned by God, and I'm eventually going to face God. There's a verse of Scripture that's just fascinating because it says, God set eternity in the heart of man. And I love that statement because if you study history or anthropology, that you quickly find that every civilization since the beginning of time has had a powerful urge to deal with eternity. There's just something in us that can't let it go, so much that it really does seem that eternity is set in the heart of man. As Scott was talking about, we had a chart last week with these 3 adventures, and we're going to look at those. You got them in your workbook this week. And the key verse that we used, remember it was on the opening page of the Bible in the book of Genesis, which just means beginning or beginnings. And this key verse is right here. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. In that one verse, just in that one verse, God is commissioning us to 4 adventures. The first one is in the phrase, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, is our commission to reproduce life, which is our family adventure. We're to fill the earth with a healthy and noble next generation. Whether we have children of our own or not, we're called to the adventure of investing in the next generation. That means as a father, we can't be an absent father who subcontracts out the raising of his kids to his wife or to the school or to the church or to our culture. That's his job. And we just can't be a good father who goes to all the activities and the school functions and the athletic events, because that's just not enough. It's not enough that our children feel emotionally loved. That's a good thing, but it's not enough. We have to become a strategic father who personally invests in his children so when they leave home, they know who they are, and they know why they're here, and they know where they're going, and they know how life works because you've taught them that. That's the adventure. Next, we have the noble cause adventure. And the phrase, subdue the earth, is our commission to fight for a better life, which is our noble adventure. The word subdue literally means to fight. We are called to fight to make this world a better place for others. And for others are the words we need to hear loud and clear. Fighting to make this world a better place for me leaves me emptiness. Fighting to make this world a better place for others brings me joy. Albert Schweitzer, the great humanitarian, put it this way. He says, I don't know what your destiny will be, but the one thing I do know, the only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. Moving from fighting for you to fighting for others is moving from success to significance. And that can be a difficult transition, but it's the most gratifying transition that you'll ever make. That's the adventure. In the phrase, on the man adventure here, in the phrase, and God blessed them, is our commission to enjoy life, which is our man adventure. God gave us things to enjoy. Why else would we love seeing mountains? Why else would we love hearing music? Why else would we love smelling roses? And why else would we love great food? And don't tell me it's because our taste buds have evolved. I mean, how in the world could love the taste of a Krispy Kreme donut, give us a competitive advantage in the survival of the fittest? There's just some things we're supposed to enjoy. Ecclesiastes says, I have seen that nothing is better than that man should be happy in his activities. And don't wait to get this adventure started, and don't ever put it on hold because life is just too short and bad habits are just too hard to break. Enjoy life now. That's the adventure. Now, the adventure I'm adding here this morning is the obvious one because the whole verse is filled with it. It's the God adventure. It's to experience spiritual life and have more than this life alone could ever offer. That's what God brings to the equation. Your teammate in this adventure is obviously God. The key words are faith and follow because that's what unlocks the spiritual adventure. The outcome is peace and eternal life because personally engaging with the living God brings peace. And it gives you a freedom to enjoy all this life has to offer. And then it gives you confidence in the next life. Jesus said that He came that we may have life and have it abundantly. And the abundant life is when God becomes an adventure to you. If you miss these 4 adventures, you may be a success, but you won't be significant, and you won't be satisfied. All right, to help us process this morning, let's look at 10 practical perspectives, because perspective is really important, like it was for this guy on a New York City subway when one of the other passengers that he was riding with had a couple of small kids that were just running around terrorizing the whole train and just annoying everyone. And this went on for quite a while until the guy had finally had enough. So he went up to the father and said, "Could you control your children?" And the guy said, "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. We're coming from the hospital where their mother just died, and we just don't know what to do." You think that guy's perspective didn't just change? Or how about the young man who's ejected out of his Ferrari during a rollover accident, and he jumps up screaming, "My Ferrari, my Ferrari!" And then a guy who saw the accident comes up and goes, "Hey, don't you know you've been hurt? You've lost your arm." And the guy looks over, and there's just a ragged sleeve and a bloody stump, and he goes, "My Rolex, my Rolex." That's a guy who's lost perspective, and perspective is important. So let's get some. Perspective number 1. These last 2 weeks have serviced a lot of intense feelings in me. I'm not enjoying life as I should. I feel burdened by too much responsibility. I work too much. Work consumes too much of me. Life is not an adventure. Help. You guys feel the tension in that statement? Tension for a man is good, especially at this point of the journey. Having things unresolved for some of you bottom liners is okay. We need to just feel the tension for a moment. We need to get in touch with our feelings because feelings are a wonderful servant and a horrible master. And the only way to master our feelings is to get in touch with them. And that's not a bunch of touchy-feely crap. That's just smart. If we bury our feelings rather than deal with them, they will eventually master us rather than serve us. Because just like buried canisters of toxic waste, buried feelings will always eventually leak. And when they do, they poison everything so that we're unable to control our feelings of anger and sadness and frustration and fear. It's good to feel what we're feeling because we're getting in touch with the cause of those feelings. Now, hear me. We're not getting in touch with the feelings. We got to go through that and get in touch with the cause of those feelings. And that's half the battle. The other half is just making the necessary adjustments. Perspective number 2. You said last week our work is to be a means of these 3 adventures, not an end to them. Can you elaborate? Well, last week we wrote down the statement. Remember this? Your job must be a means to a life, not just a living. Your job must be a means to a life, not just a living. because we can't let our job kill our adventure, and we can't justify it by saying we're doing it for the wife and kids. Because what your wife and kids need is you living the great adventure. You'll never be the man that they long for and that they desperately need if your job kills your great adventure. Are we working to live, or are we living to work? Here's what Ecclesiastes would say. Here's what I've seen to be good and fitting: to eat, to drink, and enjoy oneself and all one's labor in which he toils under the sun during the few years of his life which God has given him, for this is his reward. Our work, listen, our work should bring adventures to life, not to death. Perspective number 3, when is men's fraternity going to help me find my adventure? We want an adventure, and for a type A, we want it now. Give me 3 things to do, and I'll get them done so I don't have to come the rest of the year. Right? I love that spirit, and I wish it were that easy, but real life just doesn't work that way. Real life is a process, and the first part of that process is assembling our gear and assembling our team before we set out. We need the gear of language like half-life manhood and big hairy questions. We need the gear of clarity about our 4 adventures. We need the gear of self-awareness about our unique design and our unique purpose. And most importantly, we need our team of fellow adventurers. Perspective number 4, how do you make your family an adventure? Mine feels more and more like a grind. Where's the adventure in family? Well, first and foremost, listen to me, first and foremost, stay in love with your wife. Secondly, stay in touch with your wife. 99% of the time, when you're in love and in touch with your wife, marriage is an adventure. Get out of touch and out of love, and it becomes a burden. Now, here are just 2 tips for your marriage. First, our entire marriage, we need regular time alone with our wife. Now, that gets harder when the job gets harder and when the kids come along. So if nothing else, every quarter, just get away alone without the kids with your wife. That gives us time to remember why we got married. That gives us time to connect mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually. And that keeps marriage an adventure. I had an opportunity not long ago to do that in a big way with my wife. We were entering the season of life known as empty nest. I've got a 25-year-old daughter and a 23-year-old son, and my son was about to go off to college, and we'd had 3 years to kind of, after our daughter went, to really envision that and kind of talk about a lot of that. And there was a lot of things that we didn't know more than we did know about what that next season was going to be. But what I knew for sure, the one thing I knew is when we left our son at college and came back home, the one thing I couldn't do was to bring my wife back into an empty house where she had raised our children, where she had been an incredible mom, nurturing them and investing in their lives in all kinds of ways. And she had done that in just abundance at the church and in the community and at their school. She was just super mom. She loved it. It came natural to her. It energized her. And I knew that if I brought her back into that home, nothing would nurture. She'd just wither up and die. And so I kind of had a bit of an idea, and we bought a little RV. Now, we'd never done any RVing, but we thought we'd give it a shot. And so we bought a little RV, and we actually used it as a moving van to take our son to the 5 hours to college. And so we drove him down to college, and we unloaded all his crap, and then we hit the open road for 6 months. Now, I had worked hard to get my job kind of focused to where most of it for that 6 months was going to be travel anyway, and so we kind of put that into our routine, and the rest of it was phone and internet type of work, and so I could do that from anywhere. And we just had an amazing time traveling around the country, meeting people and seeing things, but more than anything, just reinventing and redefining who we were as a couple and who we were as individuals. And it was an amazing thing. We did a lot of redesigning, a lot of reinventing. One of the first things I realized that I needed to reinvent, though, was how we went to the grocery store. Because, and I felt real negligent at this point, that just ignorant that for 20-something years that I didn't know how my wife went to the grocery store. I didn't know that she went to the grocery store all wrong. She just got a cart and went down the aisle and seemed to randomly pick stuff that caught her attention and that she thought looked good. And I just performed a great service by coming along behind her and picking up every item as she did and pointing out where she had made a mistake, where it was either a better buy to get it in this packaging or, oh, we don't want that much of chemicals or fat or sugar and things. And aren't you glad I'm here to help you shop right? Yeah, that's about how it went over for me. So after my attempt to reinvent how we did the grocery store, my wife took a shot at it. And her reinvention was that I would drive up to the curb of the grocery store with the RV and drop her off. And then I would go off, welcome to go anywhere, but her main suggestion was to go to the gas station to fill it up with gas and check the oil and wash the windshield and inflate the tires and just wait there until she called me on the cell phone and said, I'm ready for you to come pick me up at the curb again. And so that's how we reinvented how we went to the grocery store. And that worked pretty well, but we made some great memories on that trip. We did redefine our relationship, and it's just paid dividends over this last 5 years. And one of the things I loved is I think it really showed our kids something. You know, we were able during the trips to go by each of their colleges and spend a little time with them. And I think it showed them that at every season of life, you just have to face the realities of it and do the best you can at that point. They were doing that in college. They were trying to enter into that new season of life, and they were watching us do the very same thing. And through all of that, we were just falling in love with each other all over again. And I just love the example that's set for our kids. So that's my first marriage tip, time alone. My second marriage tip is that you and your wife be on the same page about 3 things. Family, how are you going to do family? Finances, how are you going to do money? And faith, how are you going to do spiritual life? If your family is on the same page on those 3 things, marriage will be an adventure. If you're not, those 3 things will just destroy your marriage. Just eat it away. And here's the thing, guys, that's going to take some time to process. I know most of us like to do, read a book. Hey, we got the plan. Now, here, give it to our wife, and here's the plan. You go execute it. It's just not going to work that way. It's going to take time to process because she's got great ideas, and you need to listen to her, and you got ideas, and she needs to listen to you, and you need to work that out together. That's part of the adventure. And your job is not to have all the great ideas because you're probably not going to have them all. Your job is to initiate that leadership, that social and spiritual leadership in the family. And here's what I promise you if you do that. If you do that, your wife will be so proud of you as a man. And she will be so in love with you as a husband because you are bringing life-giving leadership to her and to the family. Perspective number 5, how do I find those things that make me come alive? Isn't that a great question? Wouldn't you love to have more life? That will be our primary focus in January when Tim comes up here and guides us through the Your Unique Design assessment tool. Now, this isn't just any tool, guys. This is the same tool that NASA uses to pick shuttle astronaut teams because it does such a thorough job of discovering who we are at our core and what energizes us and what de-energizes us. And at the end of Tim's leading, not only will you have a clear understanding of what makes you come alive, you'll be holding in your hand a personal mission statement that you've created with wisdom for yourself. Dude, that'll be huge. Perspective number 6, I would like to have a cause to live for. How do I go about finding one? Here's how. First, it fits your unique design. Second, it helps others. And third, it takes some trial and error. You know, our trial and error words in here at men's fraternity are discover and pursue. We need to get in the arena and try things that look like a good fit, that help others. Because every time we do that, we discover things that bring us closer to our cause until finally we have it. Perspective number 7, how can I find some man-sized adventures to put the fun back into my life? First, here comes the broken record. You must develop real relationships with other real men, because you can't have a man adventure by yourself. You just can't. Now, having fun comes natural to you young guys. Y'all are just kind of wild and crazy just from the stage of life that you're in. But us older men, we need to reinvent ourselves to have fun, or we'll just become spectators of others' fun. When you're young, you know, you go out and you play pickup basketball and you beat the crud out of each other and just have a great time doing it, right? When we get older, we go out and we play pickup basketball and we beat the crud out of each other and we can't walk for a week, right? So we just quit having fun and we turn on the television and we watch others have fun. That's no way to live. We must reinvent what fun is, and we can do that. Old guys, listen to me. We can have more fun than these young guys ever thought about having. We can't let them out-fun us. We invented fun, right? Exactly. Now what we need to do is go and reinvent fun. Perspective number 8, I'm in a job. I'm doing good. I'm making good money, but I just don't like what I do. I'm going through the motions and I hate that. What should I do? Let me give you 3 possibilities. First, you may be expecting too much from your job. Confucius said, choose a job you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life. Aw, that's sweet. Does that come with a puppy? Because that's just not true. Even the most amazing job in the world will sometimes feel like work. Possibility number 2, you may need to seek an adjustment. You may just be misplaced or misaligned because the things that you're good at, you're not doing, and the things that you're not good at, you aren't doing. Take a courageous step and meet with your employer, and don't say, I can't do that. Why not? It's an adventure. Tell your boss what you're really good at and what excites you and where you can make your best contribution. Listen to me, if you've proven to be a man of your word and a man who exceeds expectations, then he'd be crazy not to at least consider your request. Now, third, possibility number 3, you may need to find a new job. If there's no question that your job stands between you and the great adventure, then have the courage to make a change. Perspective number 9, I'm a young man just getting started. Life seems exciting enough to me now. How can I avoid ending up where all you old guys seem to be? I knew it. I knew it was just a matter of time before you young punks turned on us. Get out. Actually, it's a great question. It's a question that says, I don't want to repeat the mistakes of others. I want wisdom. And that's great. Wanting wisdom will serve you well. So the most important piece of wisdom that I could give you is this. Know who you are. And even more importantly, know who you're not. This is called self-awareness. And it's huge. How huge is it? Well, I'm glad you asked. The Gallup organization, the famous Gallup poll people, they wanted to find out what successful people have in common. Is it high IQ? Is it a certain education? Is it a certain socioeconomic status? Is it a certain personality type? What is it? Well, that's what they wanted to know. So they compared the profiles of 2 million people. These are extensive profiles that they had in their database and some new ones they added. 2 million people, and what they found blew them away. They found that there was one thing that successful people overwhelmingly have in common. It was so overwhelming that no other factor even came close. 98% of successful people have this trait in common. 98%. So what's the trait? The trait is a high degree of self-awareness. That's how huge self-awareness is. What that means is that if you have a high degree of self-awareness, you have a 98% chance of being successful and only a 2% chance of being unsuccessful. So this year, we're going to go for the summit of high self-awareness because we've all seen the summit of low self-awareness, hadn't we? Have you ever watched American Idol, especially at the beginning when they're doing these mass auditions and people come and try out and some of the people who are just awful. But you can see from them, some of those know that they are, and that's just a joke, but some of them are awful, and they get up there, and they honestly don't know that they suck. And their family, blinded by their love for them and their hope for them, honestly don't know that they suck. So the entire family is devastated when the judges deliver their verdict and tell them that they suck. That's the pinnacle of low self-awareness. But this year we'll take a big step towards the summit of high self-awareness. And we'll do that in a big way with the Your Unique Design tool that I've been mentioning through that, because you must know who you are and you must know who you're not. Perspective number 10. How religious are we going to be in here? That's a great question. I know we have guys all over the map as far as their spiritual beliefs, and I love that. In fact, I really love that. I love your good, honest skepticism. Let me be really clear. Guys, just stop for a second. Just look at me. Let me be really clear. I hate religion. I hate it. Religion makes people proud and arrogant and unhealthy in all sorts of ways. We're going to explore a spiritual adventure, not a religious adventure. Now, we'll have to be careful because spiritual adventures can easily run off into the ditch of religion. And when we're there, we're worse off than when we started. You know, when Jesus Christ was here on earth, the people he fought with the most, the people who frustrated him the most, the people who angered him the most were all religious people. Let me say it again. We'll explore a spiritual adventure in here, not a religious adventure. But I need you to play fair and have an open mind. I need you to approach this like a true adventurer, ready to explore, ready to discover, and ready to face whatever you may find. You know, we've all had a bad experience with religion or with church or with Christians. I sure have. But we can't let those bad experiences close our mind and just make a universal declaration that all spiritual experiences are bad or the same. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you this. If you had a bad meal, would you quit eating? Would you just make a universal declaration that all food is bad? Of course not. Then why would you make a universal declaration about your spiritual life? Maybe there is healthy spiritual life out there, and you just hadn't found it yet. I'm not going to cram my faith down your throat. I'm not selling anything. It doesn't work that way. I can't sell you a spiritual adventure any more than you could buy one, because a spiritual adventure can't be bought. A spiritual adventure can only be experienced. Now, I will present some evidence and some of the experiences that I've had that helped me along the way, but what you do with that is entirely between you and God. All I ask is that you don't let a bad spiritual experience cause you to miss out on a great adventure. You know, in session number 1, we talked about posing. We said men's fraternity is a no-pose zone. And guys, that goes double for spiritual posers. Wherever you are in your spiritual journey, be honest about it. You're not doing anyone any good, especially you, by acting like you have faith in something or someone when you really don't. Stop lying to yourself. You wonder where all those bad religious experiences come from? I'll tell you where they come from. They come from spiritual posers, people who will acknowledge a faith, but they don't really believe it. Don't be one of those people. Be honest about your doubts. We all have doubts. This is a faith life, so doubt must exist. You know, in order to fully experience light, we must have dark, and so to fully experience faith, we must have doubt. But it needs to be the true doubt of someone who is genuinely seeking answers, not the false doubt of someone who has already made up their mind and doesn't have the courage to admit it. Well, guys, as I close here this morning, I want to tell you a story. And I've been kind of waiting to tell you this story because it's very timely, because this fellow I'm going to tell you the story about just died a few days ago. This is about a story about the legendary American mountaineer Charles Houston. And he just died a few days ago at the age of 96. Houston was a prominent physician educated at Harvard and Columbia. He was an inventor who helped invent the artificial heart. He was an author and a filmmaker and a Peace Corps administrator. But of all those amazing accomplishments, his most celebrated accomplishments are his pioneering climbs in the Himalayas in the 1930s and the 40s and the 50s. In 1936, he summited Nanda Devi in India, which was the highest mountain that had ever been climbed up until that time at well over 25,000 feet. And then in 1938, he led the first expedition to K2, and it was an American expedition that came within hours of the summit before severe weather made them retreat. Now, K2 is known as the most dangerous mountain in the world, most deadly mountain in the world. And you could say that a lot about a lot of mountains, but I believe it about this one because I measure that by the only thing that really matters. How many people have tried that mountain and how many people have died trying that mountain? And there's such a higher percentage of people who have go to try to climb K2 that have died than any other mountain. It is the dangerous mountain. In fact, it's been coined the Savage Mountain. Well, they weren't successful in 38, so in 1953, after the war and the India-Pakistan split, all that happened, they were able to come back and to climb, and he brought another team in. And 53 was the same year that Everest was first climbed. And so he comes in with these 7 guys, and they are going really light for the day. Usually you'd have hundreds of Sherpas and trek in. They didn't have any Sherpas, just had their 7 guys. They didn't take, because of that, they couldn't take a lot of things. One of the things they couldn't take was oxygen. And they get all their gear into the mountain, and then they start staging the mountain or attacking the mountain. And the way you do that is you set up a base camp, and then you set up an advanced base camp, and then you start setting up your high camps on the way to the summit. They set up Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, all the way up to Camp 7. And you have to stock those with things along the way, so you have to retreat. There's gear and food and things like that, and fuel. And so they had done that, spent weeks doing that. And now they're at Camp 7, ready to go for the summit, and it really looks like they're going to make it. In the morning, they leave their tent to go out to start the summit climb. One of their members of the party, the most experienced member of the party, a fellow named Art Gilkey, collapsed. And Dr. Houston came to him, and he was an expert in high-altitude medicine, and he saw quickly that he had both blood clots in his legs and in his lungs brought on by altitude sickness. And Dr. Houston, one thing he knew, he knew if he got him to the hospital right then and there, he didn't have a real good chance of survival. And the odds of him being alive when they got him off the mountain, because it was going to take them weeks, if everything went well, to get him back to some kind of medical facility. And so he knew pretty much that Art wasn't going to make it. And the rest of the team, being experienced climbers, where they're at over 25,000 feet without oxygen in a storm. And the rest of the team knew, in treacherous terrain, steep rocks, steep ice. It's one of the reasons that mountain's so difficult. It's not just a walk up. This is a real climbing mountain. And they're up there, and the rest of the team knew that trying to take Art Gilkey down was basically suicide. Just being up there fully healthy was hard enough. But they never even considered another alternative. They immediately just forgot about the summit and turned their entire focus into a rescue party of their buddy. And the first thing they did was put the unconscious Gilkey into a sleeping bag and tied him up in ropes so that they could lower him down. And they started lowering him down the mountain. And they did this for several hours until they came to a stretch that was an icy traverse. And when you're traversing in the mountains, traversing is the worst thing in the mountains because the rope is always to one side of you. Whether you're going up or down, it doesn't really matter. If you fall, you swing. You do this big pendulum, and you always bang and crash into things, and then sometimes at the end of it, you're just dangling out in space. It's not a traverse, is just climbers hate traverses. And they're nearing the end of this icy traverse, so it's a vertical face completely covered in ice, and they're getting near the end of it, and the lead climber fell. And he fell and started swinging, and it immediately pulled the second guy on the rope team out of position. And the weight of those two came on the third, and he was pulled out of position. And then the same happened to the fourth. And then it came to the rope pulled tight to the fifth, and the fifth guy was there with Art Gilkey in the bag, and the fifth guy and Art Gilkey got pulled out of position. And so 6 of the 7 guys are hurtling on their way to fall 6,000 feet to the glacier below. And there's one guy left. He's the youngest guy in the party, 25-year-old Pete Schoening. And Pete is over on the side. He hadn't begun the traverse yet. In fact, he wasn't even tied into the rope. And he's watching this pile of rope, and it's just going out. And these guys are all going to go to their death. And Pete can't do a thing about it. There's no way he can stop it. It'd be suicide. But he doesn't think about himself. He grabs the rope, and in an instant, he wraps that rope 2 or 3 times around his shoulders and his waist. He grabs his ice axe, and he hits the ground, jamming his ice axe in and getting his feet in the ground, and just braces for impact. Because he knows what's about to happen. That rope's going to come tight. The first guy's already fallen over 100 meters by this point, and he's just going to get catapulted out of his position. And what happens next is legendary in the mountaineering world. It's just known as the belay. In the mountaineering world, belaying is when you're just protecting someone with the rope, whether they're above you, below you, or just managing the rope for their safety. And that's why they call it the belay, because when all that weight and impact came on to Pete Schoening, his belay held. Against all odds, it held, and he stopped the fall. And then what's more than that, these guys are dangling out into space. Dr. Houston had a concussion. There was a couple of broken bones, a lot of blood and things going on. These guys were injured. And he's got to hold these guys while they climb. They're just dangling in space while they climb back up the rope to safety. And that's an amazing feat. For well over an hour, he sits there in that position, holding the full weight of 6 guys while they're climbing back up the rope. Superhuman strength, and he did it. And the guys get back up, and they're beat and battered and bruised, but they're safe. And during the fall, Art Gilkey regained consciousness for a moment. Now, he didn't know any of this was going on. You know, he passed out, and he wakes up, and he's an experienced mountaineer. He quickly sees that what's going on, and that every single one of his buddies is going to die trying to save his life. He's not going to let that happen. So Art Gilkey, with the last of his strength, unties his rope and falls 6,000 feet to his death to save his buddy's life. And those guys spent weeks getting down the mountain and getting back to civilization. Several of them needed hospitalization, but it was a harrowing tale just what happened after that. But the devotion those guys showed to each other, the American Alpine Club came up with their highest award. Just seeing what these guys had done, they came up with an award, and they were the first ones they gave it to. They really invented it for them. And this is the words they use on the award: mountaineers of unselfish devotion. Men like Charles Houston, Art Gilkey, and Pete Schoening, they know what unselfish devotion to a team, to other real men is all about. Listen to Dr. Houston's words. When men climb on a great mountain together, the rope between them is more than a mere physical aid to the ascent. It is a symbol of the spirit of the enterprise. It is a symbol of men banded together in a common effort of will and strength against their only true enemies: inertia, cowardice, greed, ignorance, and all weaknesses of the spirit. Men of unselfish devotion. Well, men, our trek to base camp is over. We've made it. We've covered a lot of ground, and much of the adventure is yet unknown, but we can clearly see the summit from here. Now it's time to sort through our gear and form our teams, because next week we leave the comfort and safety of base camp to proceed upward, where every step takes us closer to the summit.